يا يما بذل الروح والأقصى مد إيده. هيو رصاص العدا يقتل إخواني والظلم والطغيان يسعر بلادي. أقبل شهيد أمتي بالنعش محموله ابن الطلب جنة نفد القدس بالروح والشهادة نتمنى. الله أكبر الله أكبر والنصر للمسلمين والنصر لنا إن شاء الله.
With Radio Algeria International, you will not miss a single major political or economic event. Radio Algeria International, our voice in the world.
This is the English service of Radio Algeria International. It's time for the news.
The Israeli aggression against the Gaza Strip has exceeded its 100th day despite the international calls for a ceasefire, and on this occasion Radio Algeria International dedicated its programs to the latest developments in Gaza. Over 60 people have been killed and scores of others have been wounded in new bombardments launched by the Israeli occupation against various areas of the Gaza Strip. And hundreds of thousands of people have taken to the streets across the world to protest against the Israeli genocide in Gaza. And those were the major developments. Now, the full news edition. Good afternoon. The Minister of Communication, Mohamed Lagab, has offered his sincere condolences to the family of the Algerian TV journalist Brahim Sabaoun. The late journalist passed away yesterday following a heart attack while on duty. The Israeli aggression against the Gaza Strip has exceeded its 100th day despite the international calls for a ceasefire to the conflict that caused a spiral of violence. On this sad occasion, Radio Algeria International dedicated its programs to the latest developments in Gaza. Thus, the Cultural Center of the National Radio hosted today a forum of Radio Algeria International under the motto 100 Days of Aggression, the Atrocity of the Zionist Entity and the People's Resistance. Participants to the forum made an assessment of the 100th day of resistance in the military, political, legal, medical, health and humanitarian dimensions. And earlier, the spokesman of Kataib al-Qassam, known as Abu Ubaidah, has said if justice existed in this world, the Israeli occupation would be severely punished.
100 يوم ارتكب فيها العدو المجرم.
For 100 days, the criminal enemy has been committing flagrant crimes, and if justice existed in this world, it would have taken the arms of the Zionist entity and brought all its leader and arm before justice to be punished severely. But in this world corrupt, justice is incapable of doing that, which gives us more conviction of the rightfulness and importance of what we did on the October 7th, and on what our people in the resistance have been doing for decades, now in terms of the fight against the occupation.
والاعتماد على سواعد رجاله ومقاوميه.
That was the spokesman of Kataib al-Qassam speaking on the occasion of the 100th day of the Israeli aggression against Gaza. And 5 Palestinians, including 2 teenagers, have been shot dead during incidents with the Israeli occupying forces in the occupied West Bank. Palestinian sources said the incidents took place in the towns of Ariha, Al-Khalil and Ramallah. And over 60 people have been killed and scores of others have been wounded in new bombardments launched by the Israeli army against various areas of the Gaza Strip. Palestinian sources said various areas of Gaza were hit overnight and today are down by the Israeli strikes, including the refugee camps of Al-Maghazi and Al-Bureij in the central part of the territory. The continued Israeli strikes that also targeted areas in the southern region of Khan Yunis caused internet and communication cuts for the 4th consecutive day in different parts of the Gaza Strip. The Israeli assault launched over 3 months ago on Gaza has claimed more than 24,100 lives and caused thousands of wounded. In the face of the disastrous humanitarian situation, the World Health Organization, the World Food Programme and UNICEF today warned against risks of famine and propagation of epidemics of mortal diseases in the West Bank. And this came as the Israeli army pursued its incursions into various municipalities and towns of the West Bank, where the Palestinian population is confronted to increasing attacks by Jewish settlers. In this connection, the Palestinian Foreign Ministry today affirmed that Israel's violations and attacks on the Palestinian population were being complementarily carried out by the Israeli forces and the Jewish settlers. And tens of thousands of protesters have rallied in the commercial capital of Karachi in Pakistan, demanding for the Israeli aggression to stop in the Gaza Strip, which exceeded its 100th day. The protesters, estimated at over 20,000, took the roads, raising the Palestinian flag and wearing kufiya before gathering on the city's most taken highway, Sharia Faisal. And meanwhile, hundreds of thousands of people have taken to the streets across the world to protest against the Israeli genocide in Gaza as it has reached the 100th day. Mariam Barshi tells us more.
People gathered at rallies in Malaysia, South Africa and the United Kingdom and Indonesia on Saturday, as well as at other protests in Thailand, Japan, Italy and Greece. The demonstrations were part of a global day of action for Palestine to call for an end to the bloodshed that has killed over nearly 24,000 people and wounded more than 60,300. In Kuala Lumpur, people gathered outside the United States Embassy protesting against the state's complicity with the Israeli occupation and the US vetoes at the United Nations against the ceasefire resolutions. People showed solidarity with Palestinians, holding up placards that read "Stop the genocide," as well as "Bombing children is not self-defense." Asked if Israel's impunity could be challenged by some of its allies as the death toll in Gaza continues to rise, our political analyst Hamoud Salhi had this to say.
The wave of support we continue to see every day growing in Western countries considered allies of the Zionists, like the United States, Britain and other countries in Europe, is a strong indication that this wave of support is strong, and also it is only a matter of time before it turns into real and an effective tool of political change in these countries. In the United States, debates over supporting the Zionists unconditionally is taking a different shape, with more individuals, civil society groups, and U.S. government employees are asking their government, if not to stop their support for unconditional for the Jewish state, they are also asking them for explanations. Analysts are predicting that such a trend is likely to continue to grow and will most likely be a reason for President Biden and the Democrats to lose the upcoming presidential and congressional elections. In Britain, the same questions are being raised and have drawn record-breaking of demonstrations throughout the country. Finally, in Belgium, 3 established parties are reconsidering their support for their government's decision to back the Zionists unconditionally.
Thousands of people also gathered outside the US Embassy in Jakarta, waving Indonesian and Palestinian flags and holding signs that read "Boycott Israel" and "Ceasefire now." In Johannesburg, demonstrators gathered outside the US consulate for a protest bolstered by South Africa's case of genocide against the Israeli occupation at the International Court of Justice this week. The crowd accused the US, which has supplied the Israeli occupation with thousands of tons of military equipment since the war started, of complicity in the bombardment of the Palestinian people. Thousands of people gathered in central London after taking to the streets every week since October 7th, saying that the British public largely supports a ceasefire, but UK politicians have continued to fund and support the genocide. Asked if such a trend among the public opinion is likely to continue, our political analyst had the following.
Part of the reason for this continued trend in favor of the Palestinian is that Gaza has become a worldwide issue, a humanitarian issue. Gaza has gotten the hearts of the world by the resilience, resistance, and standing tall as people who have morals and values. Today, Israel aggression is well documented in social media, which has gained credibility over any mainstream media. Israeli biased narrative are easily debunked in social media. This has exposed the Zionists and subsequently has led Westerners back in it having second thoughts and calling their governments for answers.
That was our political analyst, Hamid Salhi.
14 hours, 39 minutes, Algiers time. You're still listening to Radio Algeria International. And the Palestinian Prime Minister, Mohammed Shtayyeh, stressed the necessity for the International Court of Justice to urgently issue a ruling to put an end to the current assault on the Gaza Strip, now facing genocide, ethnic cleansing, famine and abuses of all kinds, including torture and daily killings. Addressing a cabinet meeting today in Ramallah, he said he expected the court's decision to be legal based on international law and the international humanitarian law. The Palestinian premier urged for a halt to be put to the Israeli acts of aggression on Gaza and that sufficient quantities of food be provided to its population. And South Africa's landmark case against the Israeli occupation for its genocide in Gaza has been one of the major initiatives of support not only for Palestine but also for humanity. Marim Barshigan.
The case began on Thursday at the International Court of Justice in The Hague. Pretoria is accusing the Israeli occupation of committing the crime of genocide in breach of the 1948 Genocide Convention. Nearly 24,000 people have been killed in Gaza since October 7th, including more than 10,000 children. In the 3-hour-long presentation to the judges of the International Court of Justice, the South African team, led by international law academic and barrister John Degaard, articulated the harrowing plight of Palestinians in Gaza who are trapped under siege, bombarded by continuous Israeli airstrikes, and attacked by a deadly Israeli military ground invasion. Adila Hassim, one of the lawyers representing South Africa, said that the first genocidal act is the mass killing of Palestinians in Gaza, showing the court pictures of mass graves where bodies were buried, often unidentified. The lawyers said that the Israeli occupation also blockaded food and water from the Strip, causing widespread hunger, and that it has removed the ability to distribute what is available by restricting the movement of aid workers.
First genocidal act committed by Israel is the mass killing of Palestinians in Gaza, in violation of Article 2A of the Genocide Convention. As the UN Secretary General explained 5 weeks ago, the level of Israel's killing is so extensive that nowhere is safe in Gaza. As I stand before you today, 23,210 Palestinians have been killed by Israeli forces during the sustained attacks over the last 3 months, at least 70% of whom are believed to be women and children. Some 7,000 Palestinians are still missing, presumed dead under the rubble. Palestinians in Gaza are subjected to relentless bombing wherever they go. The level of killing is so extensive that those whose bodies are found are buried in mass graves, often unidentified. In the first 3 weeks alone, following 7 October, Israel deployed 6,000 bombs per week. Israel has killed an unparalleled and unprecedented number of civilians, with the full knowledge of how many civilian lives each bomb will take.
Blyne Gralley, an Irish advisor to South Africa's legal team, for her part said the international community continues to fail the Palestinian people, despite the genocide against the Palestinians being live-streamed from Gaza to mobile phones, computers and television screens.
The international community has repeatedly failed. It failed the people of Rwanda, it had failed the Bosnian people and the Rohingya, prompting this court to take action. It failed again by ignoring the early warnings of the grave risk of genocide to the Palestinian people, sounded by international experts since 19th of October of last year. The international community continues to fail the Palestinian people, despite the overt, dehumanizing, genocidal rhetoric by Israeli governmental and military officials, matched by the Israeli army's actions on the ground. despite the horror of the genocide against the Palestinian people being live streamed from Gaza to our mobile phones, computers and television screens. The first genocide in history where its victims are broadcasting their own destruction in real time in the desperate, so far vain hope that the world might do something.
Tembenka Nkutle Toby, a lawyer representing South Africa, argued that Israeli political leaders, military commanders and government members have systematically and in explicit terms declared their genocidal intent.
It is because of the policy of Israel that Gaza has become a place of death and despair. In conclusion, Madam President, many propagators of grave atrocities have protested that they were misunderstood, that they did not mean what they said, and that their own words were taken out of context. What state would admit to a genocidal intent? Yet, the distinctive feature of this case has not been the silence as such, but the reiteration and repetition of genocidal speech throughout every sphere of state in Israel. The intent to destroy is plainly understood by soldiers on the ground. It is also fully understood by some within the Israeli society, with the government facing criticism for allowing in any aid to Gaza on the basis that it is recanting on its promise to starve Palestinians.
More than 50 countries have expressed support for South Africa's case at the United Nations top court, accusing the Israeli occupation of blatant genocide against Palestinians in Gaza.
14 hours 46 minutes Algiers time. You're still listening to Radio Algeria International. The Organization of Islamic Cooperation has expressed its concerns at the uprising tensions in the Red Sea amid American and British airstrikes against the Houthis in Yemen. In a communique, the OIC General Secretariat stressed the need to work towards reducing the tensions and avoiding the escalation and extension of the conflict in the region in order to maintain security and stability in the whole region. And the heads of the World Food Programme, UNICEF and World Health Organization have said that getting enough supplies into and across Gaza now depends on the opening of new entry routes, more trucks being allowed through border checks each day, fewer restrictions on the movement of humanitarian workers, and guarantees of safety for people accessing and distributing aid. Without the ability to produce or import food, the entire population of Gaza relies on aid to survive, but humanitarian aid alone cannot meet the essential needs of Gazans. You're still listening to Radio Algeria International, and still with the Palestinian thorn issue. The United Nations, international aid agencies and non-governmental organizations have so far managed to deliver limited humanitarian assistance in Gaza despite extraordinarily difficult conditions, but the quantities fall far short of what is needed to prevent a deadly combination of hunger, malnutrition and disease, the shortage of food, clean water and medical assistance, in particular severe in the northern areas. And humanitarian action is seriously limited by the closure of all but 2 border crossings in the south and the multi-layered vetting process for trucks coming into Gaza. Once inside, efforts to set up service points for people in need are hampered by bombardments and constantly shifting battle fronts, which endanger the lives of ordinary Gazans and the UN and other humanitarian personnel striving to help them. You're still listening to Radio Algeria International, 14 hours 48 minutes Algiers time, and time now for our headlines. The Israeli aggression against the Gaza Strip has exceeded its 100th day despite the international calls for a ceasefire, and on this occasion Radio Algeria International dedicated its programs to the latest developments in Gaza. Over 60 people have been killed and scores of others have been wounded in new bombardments launched by the Israeli army against various areas of the Gaza Strip. And hundreds of thousands of people have taken to the streets across the world to protest against the Israeli genocide in Gaza as it reached the 100th day. 14 hours, 49 minutes. Algeria's time. You're still listening to Radio Algeria International, and I invite you now to listen to the international event of the week devoted to the Palestinian thorn issue.
The international event of the week.
Claims were submitted this week by South African lawyers to the International Court of Justice requesting emergency measures to stop Israel's war on Gaza. During public hearings held by the UN's highest court based in The Hague in the Netherlands, South Africa High Court representative accused Israel of genocide. He argued that the Israeli authorities intended through their actions to bring about the destruction of a substantial part of the Palestinian national, racial and ethnic group. Addressing the Court of South Africa's Justice, Minister Ronald Lamola stated that no attack can, as he put it, provide justification for or defend breaches of the Conventions on Genocide. Asked about the incident of a ruling by the UN Court, although it is not binding on charges of genocide, rejected as groundless by both Israel and the US, our political analyst Hamid Salhi from California has this to say.
As one report indicated, the International Court of Justice offers a glimmer of hope for international justice. It could help halt the genocidal acts of the Palestinians, the illegal siege of Gaza, the collective punishment and the catastrophic humanitarian crisis of the last 100 days and the many years of before. It could also set a precedent for the International Criminal Court to address the complaints brought by Reporters Without Borders, which had submitted three complaints since 2018, the most recent of which was on October 31st last year. A collective complaint from 100 jurists from several bar associations from different countries, individuals and representatives of legal association, and 3 Palestinian organizations in the US filed on November 8, 2023. The ICC has scheduled a hearing next month in February. By being first to address South Africa's legal case, the ICJ could set the correct path for the ICC to follow. The ICC could also help set the record straight by defining Israel's criminal act as genocidal based on the evidence South Africa presented. This is crucial considering that it is incumbent upon the ICJ to determine the validity of the South Africa case by balancing it against the Zionist claims. Such a ruling has the potential to put to bed the Zionist claim and perhaps encourage Karim Khan, ICC prosecutor, to speed up the process of litigation. ICC prosecutor has taken too much time to bring these cases for a hearing and has appeared insincere, declaring during his last visit in October that hostage-taking is a serious violation of the General Conventions, while simply reminding the Zionists of their obligation, quote, to comply with the laws of armed conflicts. Worst, he drew a map for them of how to conduct their assaults on the Palestinians so they could remain compliant with the laws of armed conflicts, according to him. Finally, this case has the potential to hold the Zionists accountable for their actions before international law and legitimizes the Palestinians' right to integrity and justice.
During this week's public hearing, the International Court of Justice examined emergency measures requested by South Africa as part of a complaint it logged on December 29, 2023 against Israel. South Africa called on the court to order Israel to stop killing Palestinians and to deliberately impose destructive living conditions and to allow access to humanitarian aid. Asked if the International Court of Justice would agree to precautionary measures as evidenced by daily reports made by the UN and humanitarian organizations like UNRWA about the atrocities being perpetrated in Gaza, which caused considerable human losses and mostly destroyed the territory. Our political analyst Hamid Salhi from California has this to say.
The evidence is overwhelming and in favor of the Palestinians. As a court of international justice, the ICJ will find it extremely difficult to steer away from applying the legal standards to this case. Taking a different course would not only undermine the credibility of the ICJ, but further it would run the risks of putting citizens of the world in danger with no international law protection. Further sending the wrong image that the International Court of Justice is yet another tool of Western dominance. From this perspective, it is highly likely that the ICJ will adopt the legal standard to determine the crimes committed against humanity. It is likely, therefore, that the ICJ will take this case as a testing ground for how international law should be used, unbiased and applied for everyone equally. Not only this is the right thing to do, but it's also what the ICJ is expected to honor. In this case, one of the most important responsibility of the International Court of Justice is to be a venue where international law is analyzed, criticized, and approved with time and when it is necessary. I believe that the ICJ judges will be aware of their historical role and would rather see themselves as an enforcer of the kind of justice that is congruent with the United Nations Charter, which in essence is a charter of the entire citizens and for the citizens of the world, not just the few privileged and powerful.
Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, King Abdullah II of Jordan and Egypt President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi reiterated this week their total rejection of any Israeli plans for the Palestinian displacement from the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. During a three-party summit meeting held in Aqaba, Jordan, the three leaders rejected all attempts to separate the two Palestinian territory, notably the idea of setting so-called safe areas in Gaza, which they reiterated is part and parcel of a unified Palestinian state. They advocated a common action to throw such plan in place to closely cooperate and to coordinate with the Arab nations to achieve a just and comprehensive peace based on the two-state solution, in accordance with the international law. Asked on how could the three leaders bring to halt to the displacement of the Palestinians who have often been forced to leave their homes these days by the attacks regularly launched by the Jewish settlers who continue to grasp more land. Our political analyst Hamoud Salhi commented the issue.
The trilateral summit, which was convened in Aqaba, included Egypt, Jordan, and Palestine, acted the right way. Any attempt of proposed plan to displace the Palestinians outside their homes or denying their return to their homes or reoccupying part or all of Gaza is unacceptable, according to the Trilateral Summit final communique. This position further addresses the Zionist project designed to force Palestinians to leave their land or making it inhabitable for the Palestinians to live in. The summit rejected the reoccupation of Gaza and called further for the establishment of a Palestinian state on the border of June 4, 1967. The recent unanimous decision of the United Nations Security Council reinforces this position. Led by Algeria, the United Nations Security Council voted unanimously to make it illegal for the Zionists to force Palestinians to leave Gaza for another state or neighboring country. It is also that the Arab leaders rejected the Zionist plan to divide Gaza and separate it from the West Bank for the establishment of any future Palestinian state. While this is a Palestinian leadership matter, there is no denial that this support has a strong potential to defeat the Zionist plan. However, the final say remains with the Palestinians deciding in unity how they want to build their future. The Palestinian people, led by the resistance movement, will not settle for less than independence, and that's how it should be.
In the meantime, the Israeli aircraft pursued their pounding of Gaza, mainly of its central areas and its southern part, where thousands of Palestinians have sought refuge. The Israeli attacks launched early October on the territory have claimed over 23,300 deaths, mostly women and children.
مع إذاعة الجزائر الدولية لن تفوتكم لحظة واحدة من الأخبار السياسية والاقتصادية الهامة. إذاعة الجزائر الدولية، صوتنا في العالم.
وقت